Here we have Mad Morris, one of the RT-7 mercenary miniatures from 1987, possibly sculpted by one of the Perry twins, but I'm not 100% sure on that. It is unclear whether the Mad moniker is intended as a reference to his sanity or his temperament, but what we can be sure of is that his neck must hurt, if indeed he does have a neck. Morris would be later folded into the Imperial army line, which made sense as he was wearing the exact same type of armour as them, but since there was already a Trooper Morris in that line, Mad Morris would have to have his name changed to Assault Trooper Hardy, but we'll always know he's really Mad Morris. Especially since I wrote it on him.
This is the first miniature of a Watcher in the Dark. You know, the weird little guys from Caliban who hang around the Dark Angels, which was released in 1996. This mini is mildly interesting since the version of it shown off in the very early promotional photography of it was actually slightly different to the version that ended up on sale. More specifically, the helmet they're carrying, the lion helm, didn't have a wreath on the original version, and it had a skull rather than a lion on the forehead. Also, when you bought them, you got a free miniature of some guy called Azrael, but who cares about him?
This is a Chaos Warrior halbadier from 1998. I am not entirely sure why I bought a box of these in the late 90s since I didn't collect Chaos or even Warhammer Fantasy. Maybe I was just entranced by their terrible posture. They were a variant of the standard Chaos Warriors of the time, and as such were a plastic kit that came with metal upgrade parts. For the most part, it was just the halberd arm, which made them wildly unbalanced as the weight distribution was all to cock. Very much a penny under the base job. Also, yes, he is painted in a scheme intentionally evoking Skeletor. I have no good explanation for that either.
This is Urbik Trueshot, sculpted by Jez Goodwin. He was part of the 1987 RT4 Eldar line that launched along with Warhammer 40k. Although they were generally branded as simply space elves in those early days, presumably because selling them as Eldar implies most people knew what an Eldar was at that point, Urbik is in heavier armour than you'd usually see on an Eldar, and his weapon is equally interesting since it's a las cannon. Just one of countless examples of early 40k not really having firm distinctions between which factions had access to what wargear. Although it has to be said it's a very compact las cannon as far as las cannons go.
Here we have an undead legionnaire from the 1993 board game Blood Berets, a spin-off of the TTRPG Mutant Chronicles and precursor to the wargame Warzone. These were one-piece plastic minis that were originally intended to be on 20mm square bases, but since I wanted to use them for Warzone 2, they've been swapped over to 25mm round bases. They're one of those minis that look kinda rough and basic in bare plastic, but I think look alright once you've got paint on them. Plus you get 8 identical ones in the box, so you get plenty of attempts to get them right. And, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but as much as it's nice to have different sculpts in a squad, there is a very specific appeal in seeing a fully painted monopose squad.
While it's not really accurate to describe the 1987 Imperial dreadnoughts as being one specific thing, as you could buy their parts individually to make whatever version you wanted, you can broadly separate them into tall boys and short boys. The short boys, like this one, may need a little assistance via tactical rocks to reach a more conventional dreadnought height, should one wish to use one in more modern editions. This little guy also has a converted weapon arm made from an Orc heavy plasma gun, since he'd lost his original gun arm at some point before he came into our care. You also might notice I didn't say Space Marine Dreadnought, and that's because, although this particular one is a Lamenter, at the time these dreadnoughts could be used by regular humans too, as they just had a guy inside piloting it rather than a mostly dead Space Marine. Hence, Imperial Army dreadnoughts being a thing for a while.
Witness the struggle of trying to fill minis only a few millimeters tall. These are some of the early plastic epic scale Space Marines from the 1989 Space Marine box. Though not the first epic scale Marines, since there was technically a metal one included with the early Reaver Titan minis, which seemed to be the first, these are the first proper mass-produced ones. And it's kind of remarkable that they were able to make these with such fine detail, considering the plastic 40k Marines of the time were still the RTB01s, with their vague detail and odd posture. But still, it is very interesting to put them next to the modern Legions Imperialis Marines and see how GW's miniature scale creep hasn't only affected the mainline games.
This is a 1989 Orc Noble in power armor sculpted by Kev Adams. Also, yes, for anyone unaware, that's why Orc Nobs are called Nobs. They're nobles. Nobbles. Whatever. Anyway, this is a fairly small mini for what is more or less an early version of a mega armoured Nob. But then, like most things in 40k, Orcs were smaller back then. He needed some tactical cork to stand on as well as a bigger base to make him look suitably imposing. Regardless, it's really interesting to see how a heavily armoured Orc looked before they picked up their modern boxy aesthetic.
So, a while ago I had the idea to make a video where I painted minis in the wrong schemes. One of the ones I finished before abandoning the idea was this Black Reach Orc painted like a human Cadian guardsman. Though unsettling in its own right, this isn't the actual mini being showcased today. No, the one being spotlighted is this squig I painted to accompany the Orc, which is... well, it's certainly the most testicular miniature I've ever painted, a truly sought-after accolade, I'm sure. Strictly speaking, this is a Warhammer Fantasy mini rather than a 40k one, a cave squig released around 1992 to be specific. One of many metal squigs in that release that had very characterful sculpts, something true of them regardless of how cursed the particular way you choose to paint them was.
In 2002, the Necrons gained their first plastic warrior minis. This was a Chaos android, not a Necron, don't you start. These things stuck around for a long time and still hold up even if they've now been replaced. They have a couple of notable features. For one, the stance of their legs is often so wide that they only just fit on a 32mm base despite being originally designed to fit on a much smaller 25mm base. And they also have the iconic clear green plastic rod in their gun, a thing that many people used to talk about replacing by using different coloured LEGO lightsaber blades since they're coincidentally the same size. A neat idea I imagine most people gave up on when they realised that they were very much not the same size.